Today we've got what ended up being an obscenely complicated story, one that is significantly more nuanced than the version of it that has been shared online. So today we're going to learn what the hell is going on with Disco Elysium, and more to the point, what we don't know what's going on, because the kind of memed up version of this is being shared around the place, but wow, Connor and our team did 2 days of digging, even going into the Estonian company's house, and everything to try to find out just what the hell is going on with Disco Elysium, where the overall narrative currently is the big evil capitalist investor came and made a lot of money off the game that was critiquing the capitalism, and then somehow kicked all the people out who are responsible for the thing. But it turns out that actually may not be the case, because said investor is actually the guy whose idea it was to do it as a video game, and there's a lot going on, basically, and there's a big void of information.
Yeah, usually stories like this, you kind of go, okay, well, what's the real story behind, like, the memed narrative version? And a lot of the time you go, okay, well, the narrative version's more interesting, it's more enjoyable, because that's why it's the memed version. But in this case, I think it's so much more interesting than anyone's letting on.
Yes.
It is so complicated, so complex. There's all forms of people going to court for all variety of things, just generally involved that, no one's talked about before. And also a weird bit that we might not be able to talk about with someone in the Estonian government getting into, let's say, when you say bad things about the government, they find ways to make you look pretty bad. Very bad. Very bad. It's great.
Well, that's something.
Yes.
So, to get into this, Disco Elysium is a truly wonderful game. It has a very devoted fan base because it is such a wonderful game, and it's not just a niche one, it did extremely well, which is why just about all the internet has been talking about this. Also, the criticisms here are very thematically appropriate to the core of the game. Now, what happened is, this post appeared from Martin Lugia, who is listed as editor in the credits of Disco Elysium. And it's quite something. I am hereby dissolving the ZAUM Cultural Association, not to be confused with the ZAUM Company. On which I would note that neither Kurvitz, Hindeper, I think, nor Rostov are currently working there since the end of last year, and they're leaving, they're leaving the company was involuntary. So, to break that down, these names that are listed here are core creatives in the project, and you might be wondering, wait, Cultural Association, Company, what's going on? Essentially, they formed an art collective, right? But of course, the art collective is different from the company, even though they both share the name. So it was quite something. And he said that the reason why the Cultural Association is being dissolved is that it no longer represents the ethos it was founded on. People and ideas are meant to be eternal, organizations may well be temporary. I find that the organization was successful overall, and most of the mistakes that were made were contingent, determined by the socio-cultural conditions we were thrown into. Interesting. For a while it was beautiful, my sincerest thanks. Signed off, inpatient treatment center of psychiatric clinic, and then gives a word. So that's the other side. This came out from a psychiatric clinic, which again, then people were like, okay, there is something happening here.
Yeah, there's two ways to look at a message coming from inside a psychiatric clinic. And one of them is, should we take this message at face value, or have they lost the plot? Or the other one, considering all the circumstances, is, has this situation gotten so bad and so dire and so strange for these people working in this collective and in this company and on these games that they had to check themselves into for psychiatric help? Jesus, that's a way to sign off a letter, that's for sure.
Yeah, and there's a follow-up in the comments. Imagine a kleptomaniac, if you will. One that, instead of stealing, say, a lollipop, they take the pains to manipulate dozens of people to steal, in the end, from themselves, just because they happen to be very proficient in that kind of operation. It's what they always do, really. One of them was the first guy to be convicted for investment fraud in Estonia. All the same, I don't know if we would have managed to get the initial investment without these people. So, again, this is a bit of a almost saying, I don't want to say deal with the devil, because maybe they didn't know it was the devil back then, but the idea that you get what you want, it gets you to where you need to be, and then the monkey's paw curls. and it goes wrong. Now, obviously, this had an explosive effect online, with this being one of the game experiences that I think many people are, extremely affectionate of. To many people, this was Game of the Year. To many people, this was even Game of the past decade. It truly was that good to so many. So, effectively, what happened is that this collective then, grew into this company that creates it. The collective is no more. This is coming from Lugia, who is a founder and secretary of the collective. Now, this blog and medium has been maintained by him for quite some time, and therefore it is a source that any fans of Disco Elysium will very much treat as being, authoritative stuff from an insider. And in this, of course, he's claiming that 3 members of that collective no longer work in the company. That is an involuntary situation, so we don't exactly know what, but they didn't have a choice. That the company is still going with, we should say, 60 plus staff working on the follow-up game to Disco Elysium. Note, not sequel, follow-up game. Collective and the company are distinct entities, and there's also, this is where it gets even more bloody complicated, as was found when we were digging into the research. There's a distinction between ZAUM, the corporate entity in the country of Estonia, and then in the UK, and also a Disco Elysium specific subsidiary in the UK. That's what people would call an SPV, a single project vehicle, where sometimes what people would do for a game project is they would actually make a new company, like legally register a new company, and the money that comes in from the publishing sources or whatever goes into that, and then that is how the finances of that project are dealt with. And I'm sure there are numerous pros and cons to that. It's not something I've ever looked into, but I know it is something that people do. Because one thing that is real is that, shockingly everyone, we live in a society. And that society obviously does involve the exchange of value. And that does include instances where people can maybe say, take out some money. There is a premium that they pay because of the risk, and it's a thing where I'm going to do my job, grow the thing, make some money. You're going to be paid. I'll give you interest on the money that you gave me because you allowed me to do the thing, and that's all how it works. And this does mean that people who understand money will obviously be able to navigate these various different things better. And I think that's why what a lot of people will say as they get towards maybe their late 20s or 30s, they will suddenly realize, why did school teach me about all the things that school taught me about, when perhaps it would have been better if, in school, I learned about things like taxes, how money works, what a corporation is, because it turns out these are actually the things that you're going to need to understand. Now, for the members of ZAUM, obviously, they are people that started a leftist art collective. You can perhaps understand that they're not going to be particularly interested in learning all the finer details of money, likely within a system that they have severest critiques of.
Yeah, because that's where the funny part of the version of the story that went out comes from, right? It's, oh, here's a load of Marxists went and made a game that very much talks about the details of that and communism and stuff, and then they've been abused by capitalists. Wow, isn't that exactly what you expect? Isn't that the sort of karmic moment that, oh, maybe, let that add so much more weight to their message and who they are as people? It's that's not exactly what happened. But you can see how it comes about, right?
Because what we like to do is we like to make everything left versus right. The evil capitalist, which we can maybe caricature as some sort of pig with a top hat, versus, the crazy hippie creative commies, and they're all going to fight each other. It's just very easy to draw things down that way. Whereas this could, of course, be a significantly more complicated situation on all sides, because we're actually talking about individuals. Individuals have a thing called individuality, and when we boil things down to, these big monolithic, oh, this person is that type of ist, then, it's not particularly helpful. Here's an example. Carr, what if it turns out he's actually, someone who has decided, well, I'm living in the society we're in right now, I really like writing, and I'm pretty good with the money stuff, so let's use that to make some cool shit. Maybe he thinks that. After all, if he was the evil fat cat capitalist, would he go and fund a game that is not, Would he fund this specifically?
Yeah, I mean, and not even just that, but Disco Elysium is like, you can kind of go, well, you invest in games to make a load of money. No, you invest in games to make a load of money if you're really, really good at it, and also sort of like games. It's like Disco Elysium was by far, that was a breakout success.
Yeah.
That was not something that was going to be a massive, massive hit and like free money forever. That was full on. That was just a really like a well-funded piece of art that was created really well by some seemingly extremely talented or hardworking people, or probably both. And then it kind of exploded after the fact.
Yeah, and I think when we actually go into how this game came about, I think a lot of you are going to be surprised. So this follow-up comment, right, about, being very proficient in that kind of operation.
Kleptomaniacs.
Right? This seemingly is referring to Kar Kender, who, of course, name I've probably butchered, and Tonis Havel, perhaps? Anyway, they're executive producers on Disco Elysium based on the contextual information, and that's all pretty damn relevant. Now, as we talked about, Lugia signed this off as, being in the inpatient ward at an Estonian mental health facility, and his own position within ZAUM is unclear. He left the project ahead of its release, so he actually left working on Disco Elysium before it came out, citing bad vibes, and he described himself as a former Disco Elysium developer when launching a Patreon. So all this probably has you wondering, holy shit, we have got ideologies that are hotly debated on the internet. We have, we've got personal betrayal. We've got almost the personified avatars of systems of belief, right? Like, it's big. So what actually happened? Because that's our goal today, is to help you understand what the hell is going on.
And is it in any capacity relevant to Disco Elysium, the follow-up projects, or even the sequel that was talked about a lot? And the answer is obviously, hell yeah.
So the only objectively true thing is that the three individuals who are mentioned are no longer at ZAUM. The involuntary part has not been explained. So it could be that they were literally fired. It also could be that they did voluntarily leave, but were forced into a position where they felt they could do nothing but leave. So to them, it would be involuntary because they were put in a position where they could not do anything else without violating their beliefs. Or it could be that they were quite literally involuntarily gotten rid of. We literally do not know. All we have is this tweet from Alexander Rostov. We confirm that we are no longer at the studio, signed off by the three of them. Now, to go through a brief chronology, this is where it gets interesting actually, of ZAUM, the collective, and ZAUM, the company, and the development of Disco Elysium. Well, this is captured by Games Radar in an interview with the team in 2020, plus a few other sources that we were able to scratch together. So, Kurvitz and his collaborators formed the ZAUM Collective around 2009. It's a left-leaning, collaborative art collective creating, art, music, various other cultural works, including a Dungeons and Dragons-style tabletop setting inspired by the French Revolution that they play for a long time, and that is called Elysium. Now, what happens is that Kurvitz meets an entrepreneur and a writer called Kar Kender. Once we got Kar on board, everything really started flowing. Kar has this superpower that's very important in capitalism. He understands money. He's also a really good writer, and those seldom happen together. Now, it's worth remembering here. You can have a lot of critiques of capitalism, but it's all about the pragmatism thing. I guess I'd be cautious to over-characterize any of these individuals and what their persona and what their, driving motivations are based on systems that they do or don't believe in. Yeah. I mean, there's loads of people who very much have major criticisms of capitalism, but still will engage within a capitalist system because it's the system they're in. I mean, and they will say, okay, well, this is the world that I'm in. I can believe the things that I believe, but I'm still going to learn what I need to navigate within this world. You
could have said that in a lot fewer words. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
I suppose you're right.
Yeah, that's what that phrase ultimately means. It's this is scuff, but we're all here anyway, aren't we? Got to deal with reality.
Yeah, and that's why I get interested, because Kender, he helped fund like almost a bit of a patron-like thing, but he helped fund this stuff, which is interesting. Like, because is he good with money and also wants to do cool shit, or is he good with money and just wants to acquire assets to make more money? It's kind of hard to know. So Kender helped Kurvitz self-publish a novel about his setting. Sacred and Terrible Air sold 1,000 copies. It was never translated. There's an English version promised for release in 2020, but so far it's just there, Estonian. And that really could have spelled the end of the whole thing. But Kender had a proposal for Kurvitz. He said, "My kids were telling me, stop writing books. No one reads books. You should get into video games."
Good idea.
And so he said, all right, why don't we make a game set in this world that Kurvitz has been creating? And you might think, well, that's a bit weird. Even think about something like The Expanse. The Expanse, the TV show, the novels, obviously novels came first. I'm fairly sure that that was like a D&D thing that those guys were playing.
Yeah,
and it was also like a setting for an MMO. And okay, clearly books do work and TV does work, but it's just interesting, the way that these projects can appear. So what happens is Kurvitz is like, okay, you're right, video games. And hell, if he's the kind of guy who's into D&D, he can probably see that translating over to video games, well, as it has numerous other times before. So he takes the advice, he brings it to Rostov, the lead artist, and he looked me dead in the eye and said, "My friend, we failed at so many things, let us also fail at making a video game."
That's the kind of energy you want.
Yeah. So what happens then is Kender sells his old Ferrari to start funding the game, in addition to seeking, some more investment. I heard a tidbit that apparently it was also Dolph Lundgren's Ferrari.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's true, but that's something.
There's some serious mythos around this game. But I
Yeah.
suppose that's what happens when you've got a project that big and it kind of comes from this crazy, how did this even feasibly happen?
Yeah, because make no mistake, this is a bloody expensive game to make still.
Yeah.
So further investment comes in from friends and family. The game's scope swells and recedes over the years, and believe me, that swell is humongous. In 2016, venture capital funding is invested to get the game fully off the ground. This is found, and it allows them to bring on British Sea Power on board to do the soundtrack, which that's a soundtrack that has been a humongous win. So at this point then, the team, led by Kender, also emigrates to Birmingham in the UK as a result of basically better opportunities for production support and marketing opportunities. That's the sort of thing, I obviously don't know exactly, but there are groups in Northern Ireland. It would be Northern Ireland Screen, who, disclosure obviously, we've ran multiple projects with them. Over there in England, you would have Creative England. Who knows, maybe Birmingham has some sort of local development fund to attract businesses over.
Almost certainly does.
And they also had some fears of disruption to development via Russia, which I suppose were probably decently well-founded. So the game initially is announced as No Truce with the Furies, with a 2017 release date. Then it gets rescoped, and it basically, I think at one point, it's continents, then it's multiple countries, then it's multiple cities. Now it's a district of one city, and it's called Disco Elysium. The game comes out in 2019. It is a stripped-down, achievable version of the overall vision, tempered by a collaboration of 10-plus writers and editors alongside the engineers and the artists to actually, make it a game. So, large quantity of writers working on this project. Of course, the game is critically lauded. It's a big success. It makes €7 million in profit during its first 6 months. And that same report says that the studio in February 2022 is owned in the majority by Tutriki. Basically, there's this guy, Ilmar Compass, and that's his company. Again, look, I'm probably butchering every name here. Sorry. And then also the minority, so around 10% shareholdings by Kender, Kurvitz, and some other invested creators. So the thing here that sticks out to me is, it's the way that they went to get their funding was VC. And that probably happened because perhaps, your man being an entrepreneur, he maybe had those VC contacts. And that is one way that you can go in a situation like this. So the way that it is, if you're just getting a publishing deal, but you are still an independently owned studio, so that would be a studio that's say, privately held by its founders or whatever, you do a project with a publisher. The norm these days is that You own your IP. Now, sometimes a publishing agreement may give the publisher first right of refusal to a sequel or to something else in the IP for a certain period of time. I think the framing there would just be the publisher's like, hey, we funded this thing. Now you're going to go do a bigger version of somebody else. What? So that's like the kind of thing that you see in publishing contracts once they pop up, but obviously those contracts do vary. So that's one way of doing it, where it is more on a project-based sort of basis. The other way, though, is you bring an investor on where you give up equity in your company in return for that finance. So it's kind of like two pretty damn different funding mechanisms, and certainly the one that I would like to never really have to go down, to be honest, is the one that they went down.
Which is almost like you said earlier, making a deal with the devil in a sense.
Yeah.
You don't know it's that at the start, but you are going, okay, well, our fate is ultimately in your hands, Mr. Monkey Paw. Do your best.
So yeah, here's an example. Tim Sweeney is the majority shareholder of the privately held company of Epic Games. If Tencent want that company to do something and Tim Sweeney says no, there is basically nothing. I mean, short of if they were trying to instigate a hostile takeover or some stuff like that, really, Tencent wouldn't be able to outvote Tim Sweeney. That's basically the point. Whereas in this situation, the majority of the company does seem to have been owned by Ilmar's, investment vehicle, which obviously does mean that they sold control.
Yeah, and that's where people start to see the things coming up and going, oh, so it's an investor who owns the majority of the company, which means they now make all the decisions. Oh, well, we can put two and two together. We know where this is going. Although the story definitely, people did misrepresent it quite a bit. Because
yes.
Amazon were allegedly involved in some capacity, which turned out not to be true in the way people were saying.
Yeah. Again, it's just on the internet. It's very easy to make a tweet that'll just get 20,000 likes. And who knows, maybe shy of 1 million impressions, and it could be entirely false because it's Twitter. There is no fact-checking mechanism, really. Like, somebody might just, in a comment drop an update. Well, that doesn't matter because the initial tweets just rinse through everybody's timeline. So, as for the leaving involuntarily, we don't know. They have not said. We know that Kurvitz was still involved at a marketing and creative level as late as October 2021 because he appeared as a part of Steam Tabletop Fest. And now we understand that those 3 individuals who were named originally left at the end of 2021. And per the Estonian Corporate Register, machine translated, it does show that Kurvitz was recalled as director of the Zaun parent company by the shareholders. Towards the end of 2021.
Someone's been ousted.
Now, this was ratified by a 69% majority shareholder company represented by Ilmar, and 10% minority shareholder company represented by Kar Kender, who is, of course, the guy who published the book, and then whose kids convinced him a game would be a good idea. So the thing with Kar is he's not just a money man. He is a money man. He understands these things. He's also a really good writer, is one of the writers we believe that worked in this project. And I mean, yeah, obviously would have had something to do with the current ownership situation of ZAUM, the company.
Yeah, so you can very easily see, you can look at that and go, oh, right, well, this was clearly like a change of ownership, a forced change of hands of the company, a kind of, oh no, we're taking this big vehicle now, it's worth loads, and we're going to drive it into the sunset without you because you were one of the original creatives. But clearly, considering it was Kender's involvement and he was happy to, help ratify, then clearly imagine there's, when you think about the entirety of that person based on what we've told you, you see it's definitely a little more interesting than that. And it's likely more, and this is the part where it can be a little bit juicy, but it's also a less easy to digest story when it's like, oh, maybe there were personal disagreements and maybe even creative disagreements, because you would imagine in an art collective there would at least be some creative disagreements at some point in time.
Yeah, you would.
If not hundreds of thousands in the making of the game originally.
You would, and we don't know the context. Like, maybe they were just being rock solid to a plan that didn't make sense, that was irresponsible considering they had 60 plus staff. That could be true. It maybe isn't true. We literally do not know. Now, one thing that we do not know is, as it was reported on Twitter, is the Amazon situation where people were talking about there being a deal with Amazon for a Disco Elysium TV series, and that, of course, working with Amazon wouldn't exactly be going with the leftist ideas of those who formed the ZAUM collective, which would then be, their wishes not being respected by the company, even though they are founding people on this team who are at the core of this IP. And the thing is that that's not actually literally true, because actually it turns out that in June 2021, DJ2 Productions, who are also behind the Sonic movie, because everything's weird today, they signed a deal to develop a Disco Elysium TV series with ZAUM, and there was no distributor or creatives attached. Now, I think we can all see that that's an awesome setting. We could totally see a really good TV show with incredible performances in that setting. Fair enough. Now, where Amazon comes into the picture is that DJ2 signed up with Amazon for first refusal on all of their projects, not just Disco Elysium. So, ZAUM did not do anything directly with Amazon. It was that ZAUM evidently sold the rights to DJ2, and then DJ2, owning the rights, formed a deal with Amazon. And one assumes that that was a thing that was okay for that company to do based on the, whatever they had signed with ZAUM. So even while Kurvitz was a board member, the deals that were being worked on, they were for distributing the rights, but those conversations were not with Amazon. And that's actually the end of tangible information on these guys leaving. There is literally no answer that has not been filtered by Martin Lugia or is not based on trying to basically look at these social media posts and trying to divine intent. We may as well be here with our water divining rods, putting them over our phones with the Twitter app open to see if they move.
Yeah,
we don't know.
Everyone's just trying to see what the juiciest part of the drama is, and no one's telling them because they're keeping it personal. You're like, shit. Just come out and say. Just come out and say you were fired for some reason, please. Yeah. I'm sure we'll likely find more as we see, because there's stuff about like whether their next project was going to be, Disco Elysium 2 is a straight sequel, or is it going to be something different because they want to break, and that was kind of like it could be as simple as a disagreement on that, could be more.
Yeah.
I think it's just you let your imagination run wild when it comes to things of, the original creators of the successful project kicked out. Oh no. And you start to get some real good ideas in your head. Yeah, I mean, especially when we're used to things like, say, the creators of the Avatar setting,
yes. Like last year, I think it was, when they broke up with Netflix and then formed, like the Avatar Studio, whatever that company's called.
Yeah, I actually saw someone on Twitter earlier compared to Cave Story, which was Nicalis just going, oh yeah, sorry, Amaya, you may have made one of the most interesting and best indie games of its era, but sorry, we're just going to take all the rest of your game and ruin it for you, to the point where he then made either two or three follow-up games all about how that company are very, through creative use of subtext, how they're all horrible bastards. So maybe we'll see if their next game that these creators work on is an even harsher criticism of capitalism, we may be able to divine the intent from that.
So the thing here is that ZAUM, the company, has said that they have no further comment to make. They said that, it was a collaborative effort with every team member's contribution being valued and essential, and that their creative team remains focused on their next project. Now, that's the thing. We are talking about, 3 staff.
Yeah.
As per what is confirmed in that tweet. Right? So the vast majority, it would seem, of those behind Disco Elysium are still working at ZAUM, the company. Pending us finding out about any form of exodus.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Which we've not heard about yet.
Yeah, this is what we know of so far. And this could be a very case of, is it 3 creatives who feel like they should be, valued more and have thrown a strap? Or is it everyone else is through the mechanism of having a job and needing to be paid for their job? Or well, we can't go anywhere else, can we? Because obviously, when you're... I suppose that's the problem with an indie project. You could just go get another job, made a good game, but it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing here is we do think that they were not making a direct follow-up to Disco Elysium. or at least very much not a sequel because of some job listings. Right, one, this is environmental concept artist for the creation of non-Earth environments, enthusiast for science fiction, create and visualize new worlds. They have a job listing for a sales and monetization specialist for the company. Now, some have seen that, fixated upon this, that the candidate will be able to maximize and diversify revenue streams for full game add-on and live services content. It's the kind of thing, who knows what that means. At the end of the day, someone does need to do vaguely that form of job. Working out, if we're self-publishing this, how much do we sell it for? What is our strategy when it comes down to Steam sales? How do we coordinate doing any of this shit? What about merchandising? What about DLC if people want more stuff? All of these things which are tied into the business, and it's the kind of thing that when you have staff to pay, if you are leaving a whole bunch of money just left, then you would see it as not being responsible for the staff. But it's one of those things that can cut so many different ways. Yeah. Because what could a company do? It could do that at the expense of its customers rather than in an expansive way that gives their customers things that they actually enjoy. As an example, there are many people who really like a game and they are glad that the company behind the game has got a really cool bit of merchandise. Right? Like all the Nier merch. That's really good. The FF14 merch that people really like. That's an idea, or that's an example of further monetization being things that people want. The thing is, we literally don't know.
Yeah. On the other hand, you've got, of course, the top Reddit comment on this post is, of course, yes, the Disco Elysium Battle Royale everyone's looking forward to. Or you go, okay, merchandising, Fallout 76. Would you like an IKEA bag jacket? That's the stuff that people think about. And that's the case where it's all about like the perspective in the story of, okay, well, so you look at it and go, okay, well, the lead creatives seem to have been, kicked out of the company for this really cool independent indie game that had these like really strong messages about individuality, all that crazy stuff. And you're like, okay, well, this is probably bad. And I was like, well, there's bad vibes here, right? There's definitely some sort of bad juju. So you take everything to its logical negative extreme then and you go, oh, well, so company comes in, takes over, hires a monetization specialist. Oh, you're going to try and nickel and dime players from now on? You're not going. Everyone just sees like the specter of Bobby Kotick, but like, yes, make the money, make Disco Elysium 2 free to play, and have cosmetics. I don't even know how that would work. But obviously, if this were a better story and just, hey, we're hiring, say there wasn't the drama of like the staff being removed. If it was just, hey, we're hiring for this, everyone would go, oh yeah. They're just like trying to figure out how to monetize, because obviously Disco Elysium did the thing with Final Cut, where they went, hey, we've got some money from selling the game. We can now make a better version of the game. And that's technically a live service, right? Very technically, because the definition doesn't really exist, more or less. People just kind of go whatever it is. But, here's game. We've added voice acting to the game. That is a live service update. How do we monetize that? And obviously that was them selling the Final Cut, because it was, just a classical, here's an upgraded edition. And that's the thing where that could be it. It could be something else. But it's that idea of, the ideals. The ideals, like Luiga was saying about the collective no longer represents the ethos it once did. And you can read into that so many ways. And then you also go, well, he was in the psychiatry ward, so do you take that with a grain of salt? What were the original ethos? Because he didn't put down on paper. They abandoned the ethos of make good games. Didn't say that.
Yeah, everything's between the lines.
Yeah.
So it obviously seems like the thing that they were doing, being science fiction and all that, doesn't really seem to be what Kurvitz was planning to work on, basically into his old age, because in 2019 he said this to the Escapist. We have an insanely ambitious list of projects we want to make in the Elysium setting. He wants to make one who's like, 50 or 60 and go absolutely crazy throughout all commercial considerations and go as conceptual as possible in the tabletop setting. A really crazy pen and paper game, which is like all super cool. But what is this? If ZAUM are going on to make like a sci-fi project? We don't know. Only last year, Helen, of course, was in her role as lead writer on Disco Elysium, and she was saying the future holds more of Elysium. We've spent years designing a world, and we're not ready to leave yet. Right, but what is the deal with this next game being science fiction then? Was there a disagreement over that? And then the thing is, these 3 people are not the only people who wrote Disco Elysium. It was a team of over 10 writers. Here's a bunch of stuff from Fireside Chat for Ludinaricon, which, funny enough, is a narrative games event put on by Our Games publisher. So at that, Argo and Justin were talking about the creative process, essentially talking about how, someone's writing a pass in a character, someone else is coming in, writing a pass in a character, and there's so many different levels of iteration, which, I mean, it ends with, I guess it taught us a little bit of how small we really are, because it's a collaboration. So then you kind of wonder, well, I mean, this is 3 people. There's evidently a lot more people who went into making this game be pretty damn excellent. Yeah. So does that mean that ZAUM is still, is no longer ZAUM, even though it does seemingly still contain a bunch of the people who literally made this game, including on a creative level?
Yeah, and then if you want to be really crazy and read into those lines, you see, you can be the most brilliant person in the world, but if you're not a team player, this potential will never be realized. Is that the idea of, oh, hang on, if you maybe went in from a different perspective, those 3 people who may actually have just been like, wait, we just released what people call one of the best video games ever written. The easy game of the year for a lot of people. It's like redefined what writing in video games could be on like certain levels for indie games. Because I mean, that's going to, you're going to smile at yourself in the mirror after doing that. Like,
yeah,
there is a potential for crazy ego trips to come out of that. Especially when you start to think, oh, well, people like my parts the most. Oh, all these other chumps were just helping me. And that's totally a consideration that could happen. We have no idea if it has or not. Or, but that's the thing. It's this personal story. Everyone's looking in going, oh, what can we see? What can we make out of this drama here? And it's exactly that, where you read into the lines anywhere in any of these quotes, and you see a hell of a lot more than what's actually being said.
Yeah, so ultimately, to kind of finish this one off, the default reaction is insanely unhelpful to this entire situation, and it does not serve to help people actually understand what's going on with this story. There is a lot more ambiguity than perhaps people are assuming. There is more nuance. At the end of the day, games are a massive collaborative effort. This is right now a 60-plus team. I think it is safe to say that the final game was something far beyond just the original idea that was pitched between Kender and Kurvitz, because it was 10-plus writers. Those writers also have a very strong creative stamp on all of this. So yes, these 3 may decide to return to games again, and if they do, this story will probably be useful to them. I mean, Kurvitz is lionized as the creative force behind Disco Elysium because it is built from his setting and a book, the book that he wrote, as well as all the kind of meme arguments that he wrote, 1 million words of dialogue for the game, even though we really don't. Again, you don't know, and because things are written and then rewritten and another writer does a pass and it's all a big collaborative thing, what does that literally mean? Right? Yeah. I mean, take our game, Thomas and Eric going over, passes of dialogue as a writing duo. They both own shit, right? Mm-hmm. And that does still stand when you increase that writing team.
Yeah, isn't that kind of ironic? They both own it, so you can own things collectively.
Ooh. So basically, we also don't really know who has the rights. What was the deal there? Because perhaps Kurvitz does own the IP, but ZAUM, the company, has exclusive right to exploit the IP in any context. Maybe they have something like that. Again, who knows? What we do know, though, is that ZAUM does exist. It has a team of 60-plus people. That company, when you look at the individuals involved, they're also the people who made Disco Elysium. So it doesn't mean that the next thing that those people do is going to be shit. Because, again, we literally don't know. People are being vague and relying on reading in between the lines. And that's not particularly helpful. I mean, it does obviously incite the more dramatic reads of this. I could probably sit down and we could come up with all sorts of very interesting theories that are extremely dramatic and emotionally resonant. But it would be irresponsible to do so, right? But we should note that one of the final statements Luika made was pretty pro Disco Elysium 2. Nah, I think that things with the sequel are actually sweet enough. You might even get it the way it was meant. It might take a shit ton of time, but RPG fans are sort of accustomed to waiting, ain't they?
We sure are.
Take a breath, because that's that. Wow.
Yeah, that's, it's pretty fitting, right? That a game so unbelievably complicated and complex, but dramatic and interesting and so popular has the exact same thing happen with the meta-narrative surrounding the game. It completely makes sense.
Yeah.
It's almost too perfect. You know, if I were conspiratorial, I'd say it's manufactured, but it's clearly not. It's clearly just like how many indie games have this story, but how many games are like big enough that people will talk about them in a big way and actually go and do the devs? How many games are like, hey, this is a great game, and it's all gone horribly wrong immediately after, because as soon as people get money or success or even finish something and have to do something else, things change, it goes wrong. It very rarely goes wrong with enough people watching to go, oh, what's this?
Yeah.
How can I get a viral tweet out of this?
I mean, hey, like, how many VFX companies have died at the hands of Marvel? The whole situation with the effects house, they did like the pretty fucking groundbreaking Life of Pi special effects, and shortly at, like, there's literally protesters for the treatment of VFX workers outside the Oscars when they're accepting the Oscar for visual effects. And, you know, basically sometimes the whole world is a little bit of a torment nexus. And, yeah, it's like, great, brilliant game came out. Will people be able to keep their cool and work together afterwards? Sometimes it is very unfortunately not the case. I really hope that this group does... look, I hope the company gets to keep on making cool games. I mean, if I look at that original investor guy, I'd at least hope that he went to try to publish, you know, help your man, help Kurvitz publish the book because he thought it was a good book and it was interesting. And that probably means he understood vaguely what it was about, probably understood what the game was about. Yeah. Like, he probably ended up thinking, holy shit, this is an incredible thing. I want to fund this. So it's like, what, are you really here funding that which proclaims you should be destroyed, if I was going to put that in a really dramatic way? I mean, again, this is just between the lines. It could be like when I saw this news break yesterday, I was like, oh, they tried to sell out to Amazon and the original creatives didn't like that and they left. Typical.
That's normal, yeah.
But now it seems, well, that's not really what happened. So I suppose I'd like to know, in this grand spectrum of possibilities, what do you think happened with this company? And I suppose if you would like to support our company and the Antarctic exploration-inspired survival narrative RPG that we're making, The Pale Beyond, you can check it out down on Steam.
Yes, there is actually a new demo that is actually updated from the last one, which is all of the nice changes in feedback and things. More representative of the final product. Not obviously fully representative because it is a demo. But it's up there. You can play it. Also, go play other Next Fest games because they're all great.
No, we've been having, honestly, extremely positive feedback. And so far, in terms of wishlist and stuff, performance well above expectations. At least my expectations. So, I'm very happy with that. Anyway.
Yeah, which means, absolutely, according to this story, in about a year, we'll be recording a video on how this has all went horribly wrong. Fantastic.
Won't that be fun?
That'll be great.
No matter what happens, content begets content.
Absolutely.
With that said, you can check out our game down below on Steam. I'd also say, like, Disco Elysium is an awesome game, so you can always, pick that up and give it a shot because it's pretty damn great. With that said, let us know what you think. I'll see you next time.